You know, if this was where I grew up, you wouldn't be here. And I want to explain what I mean by that very enigmatic sentence. I grew up on the East Coast. And in the East Coast, in August, on Shabbat, no one is there. In Philadelphia, I remember my father saying, when people would say, "Where is the congregation?" Down at the shore. Because in Philadelphia, that's what you do. You go to the shore, which means New Jersey, basically Atlantic City. This was before there was gambling. Because nobody wants to stay in the city in August. So either the kids go to camp, the families go to the shore, and the synagogue is empty. And that's why my father always also used to say that he wishes he could take Leviticus, Vayikra, and put it in the summer, and take Devarim, Deuteronomy, and put it during the year, he said, so that when the synagogue was empty, I could talk about skin diseases and ritual, which is what Leviticus is all about. And Devarim, Deuteronomy, which is so rich, I could talk about it when there's actually somebody in synagogue. And that's why I moved to Los Angeles. Because here you are in August, and I get to talk about what might be the richest single parasha in all of the Torah, because this parasha, Va'etchanan, has the Shema, the V'ahavta, the 10 Commandments, a little echo of the Pesach Seder. Everything is in this one parsha. And it also has my favorite verse in the Torah. But what is that? You think I'm not going to tell you? Think I said that and then I'm going to say thank you and good night. I'm going to get to it. They probably are calling to find out. Tell them I will get to it. So you could, in fact, pick lots of different verses. And it probably depends in part on mood and situation. 2 rabbis in the Talmud identify their favorite verses. Rabbi Akiva says the most important verse in the Torah is V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You should love your neighbor as yourself. And we can understand why you would think of that as the most important verse in the Torah. Ben Azai, another Talmudic rabbi, says, Zeh Sefer Toldot Adam. This is the book of the generations of Adam, and that's the most important. Why? Because it shows that all human beings come from the same ancestor, and they're all related to one another. And I want to say both of those are great candidates. And I am not in any way trying to say that either Rabbi Akiva or Ben Azai were wrong when they picked those. You could also, by the way, if you were an environmentalist, if you were worried about climate change, you could pick the verse about how God gave us a garden of Dol L'Shamro, to guard and tend it. And that could be your most important verse. If you were, I don't know, someone who was concerned primarily about belief, Ani Hashem Elokecha, I'm the Lord your God, could be your most important verse, except that happens a lot in the Torah. So you get to have your most important verse like every week. I'm going to tell you what mine is and why. It's a couple of words this morning. Ushmor nafshecha ma'od. Guard your soul carefully. And I'll tell you why that's my favorite verse. It's because there was a time when, in fact, there were lots and lots of social sanctions on the way people behaved. There were certain things you just didn't do. And not only were there certain things you just didn't do, but the influences that you were subject to were very restricted. There were a lot of things that were not available to read or to see. and you were in a community where people watched out for what each other were doing, and they knew because we all lived in small villages, and you had multiple generations living in the same home, so grandparents knew what grandchildren were doing, and grandchildren got to see different generations. It was a very different atmosphere. America, as you know, places a tremendous premium on individualism. And individualism for most people is, I get to do whatever I want. You don't get to tell me how to be or what to do. And that has been a tremendous benefit to human history and a tremendous benefit to human beings, because as you know, being told what to do all the time is no panacea, it is no great thing either. Just ask a child. And what is one of their first words of rebellion? You don't get to tell me what to do, you're not the boss of me. That is the voice of America speaking. The downside of that is that once you are liberated to do whatever you want, the restraints on your behavior do not come from the outside, they have to come from the inside. I know people who spend an enormous amount of time and energy on their physical health and never think about the health of their soul. I know people who are extremely careful about what goes in their mouth and pay no attention to what comes out of it. When I said earlier that I was going to talk about what was the image of God, my friend Herschel Nagy said, I'm staying for the sermon because I've always wondered, what does that mean, the image of God? There are lots of definitions of what your soul is or the image of God is. I'll just give you mine. It is the part of you that I cannot point to. I can point to your sense of humor or your arm or your face or your history, but there is something irreducibly you about you that wasn't true of any human being in history and will never be true of any other human being in history, that you are unique, and that uniqueness in you is your soul, and only you can guard it. We have access to any image, any idea, any story, anything we want at the click of a button. And the only thing that will tell you, you know what, this is actually not good for me to read, to see, to do, is if you guard your own soul. That is, in large measure, what the Torah is about. It's about people struggling to guard their souls, and sometimes they do it well, and sometimes they do it badly. But in a society where nobody will monitor you, and where you can do pretty much whatever you want, and see and be exposed to any influence you choose at any time that you choose, this is the verse that matters. Because this will be the thing that shapes you when, sooner or later, your soul will be tested. And it could be tested on a grand scale, in historically heroic ways, like on October 7th. Or it could just be tested when you have the opportunity to do something that you know you should not do, but you want to. And then the question is, what kind of strength have you built inside your soul? There is a beautiful story that is told by the South African writer Alan Paton in one of his novels about a man who dies and he goes before what he calls the big judge. And God looks at him and says, "Where are your wounds?" And he says, "My wounds? I don't have any." And God says, "Why? Was there nothing worth fighting for?" It's not easy to guard your soul, and it leaves you with wounds. Remember how Jacob, when he fought the angel, was wounded and could not walk the same way ever again. But his soul met the test because it had been shaped along the way. There are a lot of verses in the Torah and endless wisdom. But for a society that has no guardrails around us, guard your soul carefully seems to me to be the most important verse we can read and study and follow. So I wish you all the benefits and fruits of freedom. And one of them is the knowledge that the restraint on freedom comes from within, and that that's a good thing. As the poet said, the only way you can make music is if you tie the bow very tightly on the violin. When you restrain yourself, when you make taut restraints so that you know who you are, that's when your soul makes music. The Torah is our guide, not only to life but to song. Shmor nafshecha ma'od. Guard your soul carefully. It is your greatest gift, and no one else can do it for you. Shabbat shalom.